Hello, how's it going? It's good to have you here. Neville Goddard mentioned in one of his lectures, about his father's technique of visualizing or imagining the day ahead. And I don't know why it's not talked about more. Maybe the reason for that is it just doesn't factor in as high or as not as successful, or it's not really a big deal to anybody in comparison to Neville's teachings or practices or ways. But it made complete sense to me when I first heard it, when I first discovered Neville, and he mentioned it. He mentioned his dad visualizing the day ahead every morning, sitting in his chair. Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know why people don't talk about it more. So I thought I'd mention it. And I had a little search and I found a lecture called Order Your Conversations Aright. I've heard people refer to this lesson before. And it is chock full of real gems. But I wanted to share with you specifically an excerpt that refers to Joseph Goddard's way of being every day in the morning, that his 10 children and his wife would have witnessed every day. And I think it comes more natural to me than a lot of other Neville techniques or practices or methods or ways of being. And I think it probably came natural to me because I've been doing it all my life. And I bet you have too. And and that is really the reason, I guess, why when I heard Neville mention it in a lesson here and there, hit the nail on the head. So I'm going to revisit that and share that with you now. And here we go. But now let me share with you a story I know well, the story of my father. He was born a very poor white man in the island of Barbados. My mother was born poor. She had nothing, he had nothing. And they proceeded to have children. 12 children were born, 2 died at birth. 10 survived. He had nothing. How he got hold of this, I do not know. But the first time he heard me speak in New York City was a Sunday morning, and when we went back to the apartment, he said, "You know, everything you said this morning is true, but why do you tell the people to close their eyes? Don't close your eyes. Keep them partly shut. You can control your imagination and you can control your attention better if the eyes are not completely closed. When you see me in the morning after breakfast, reclining in my chair, you might think that I am just sleeping it off." Neville interjects because he's a heavy drinker. Neville continues, "You might think I'm simply sleeping it off. I am not sleeping off anything. I'm doing my day's work then. I bring before my mind's eye the men that I want to deal with that day, and I control the conversation. I tell them exactly what I want to tell them, as though it were true. I let them tell me, confirm that it is true, and then, when I am completely satisfied with my inner conversation, then I go to town. And it works that way." Now, He started behind the 8 ball. He had himself, my mother, my grandmother, and the 10 of us to feed, plus a few servants. It was not easy. But when he died in 1959, he could leave his 10 children because my mother preceded him by many years and he never remarried. She died in 41 and he said, "No, I've been so blissfully happy with your mother, I could not ever get married again." So he remained single until he died at the age of 85. But when he died, that poor man could leave a family of 10 independently wealthy, each, not just collectively. He gave it to each individually as a block of stock in the company, just to the 10 of us. In 1951, it was then equal to an independent income for each of us. It has tripled since he gave it to us when he died in 1959 under the control of my brother Victor, who practices the same thing. Victor doesn't smoke and he doesn't drink, but he sits alone, and in his room he, too, is carrying on his little inner conversations, premises of desires fulfilled, and he can completely control that imagination of his. He can completely control the inner conversation, and things work just as he has determined them. He never goes to church. He's a religious man in the true sense of the word. He gives generously to charity and to all people. You would never know how many people he helps on the island because he doesn't publicise it. That works for him because he has found out inner conversations will do it. And you know how day after day there are certain people who will run the same thing like a record. So that's it. That's all I wanted to share with you. I trust that will be something that is a good reminder for you as well. Before I go, in the same lesson of Neville's, there's a little gem that I think is really worth mentioning and reminding you about. And it's Neville Goddard's wife, who he called Bill. And this is something that I often reflect on and often actually say to other people in my life to kind of back up, I suppose, my way of being in the world. The two things really stayed with me about Joseph, Neville's dad, and about this excerpt that I'm about to share with you that his wife Bill told him. And here we go. Back in 1953, my wife had a vision. It was an audio vision. She jumped out of bed and came into the living room. I always rise early. She came barging through looking for the dictionary and she said, "I've just had the most wonderful experience. I saw nothing, but I heard the most wonderful voice, a voice of authority. And the voice said to me, 'You must stop spending your thoughts, time, and your money. Everything in life must be an investment.'" So she wanted to see the difference between spending and investing. According to the definition in the dictionary that she had at the time, when you spend, you give out without any hope of return. It's a waste to spend. When you invest, you always expect a return on your equity. So you must stop spending, and everything you do from now on must be invested. And stated what they are: your thoughts, your time, and your money. These are three things that man thinks he has in abundance, and he is spending them morning, noon, and night. He wastes his time in trivia. He wastes his thoughts. He wastes his money. So, if this vision of hers is actually put into practice, and she is the first one to admit that she does not practice it, she was the instrument through which it came, but she would be the first one to admit that, raised as she was in the most conservative environment, that she doesn't really live it because she lives a restrained life. She would think it only becoming of a lady to express herself. Well, I would say, openly. She feels it, and she knows now that she was thinking of saying it, but she restrained the impulse. She said it anyway, and she knows now that her body is an emotional filter, and it bears the marks of her prevalent emotions. Anyway, Joseph Goddard and Bill, lovely. Neville had really wonderful people in his life. Thanks, Neville. Thanks, Joseph. And thanks, Bill. And thanks to you for listening and watching.